Hey guys, welcome back to the BuzWeaver channel, and in our top stories today, starting it off with Mother Jones. Senators introduce a bill requiring immigration agents to show their faces. Democrat sponsors call masking tactics a clear attempt to compound fear and chaos and to avoid accountability, which I think is a bit of an exaggeration. And there's a lot of tit for tat, ladies and gentlemen, back and forth over this. And just the reason I wanted to start it off with Mother Jones is because this argument of identity, right? So we have here Alex Padilla. Typically, senators wear their pins, like this gentleman here has a little pin here. Usually, senators will wear their pins so that people can easily identify them. And this would have been one of those situations where Padilla could have been more readily identified. Of course, he was there to be an agitator. But had he worn his pin, it may not have created the situation that he was trying to create. So we could go back and forth on this, tit for tat. But I wanted to start off with Mother Jones here because essentially this is the topic. And we're going to move more to the Guardian here because it gives a little bit more of illustrations and outlines. So Democratic senators introduced a bill to prohibit ICE agents from wearing masks. Immigration officers would be prevented from wearing masks and be required to display badge numbers. So Democratic senators introduced a bill, as we just mentioned here, the Visible Act, introduced by Senators Alex Padilla of California and Cory Booker of New Jersey, comes in the wake of scenes of masked immigration agents in unmarked vehicles snatching people off the street without meaningful identifying their agencies or presenting a warrant, prompting observers to liken immigration and customs enforcement arrests to kidnappings, which is absurd. This is the exaggeration. This is the sensationalizing. This is the escalation that they try to introduce because, well, the main reason is they don't want these rioters and protesters and activists and maybe even these immigrants to turn on them. That's really the bottom line. So the tit for tat back and forth over these identities is just a leveraging point because we already know about doxing. Doxing happens. Doxing is a problem. And each time we hear from Tom Homan or others from Homeland Security and so forth, we hear that the increase in agents or people attacking the agents or their families or harassment by people against these agents is very significant. These individuals need to have their level of protection as well. They're doing their job. They should have the privacy and the decency to go about to do their jobs. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the tit for tat. But here you can see it is Alex Padilla, or as J.D. Vance calls him, Jose Padilla. And Jose Padilla, if you guys don't know, was an individual back during the Bush era who threatened Bush and so forth. I think it was he had a device he was going to use of some sort, as I don't want to get into too much detail here because it is YouTube. But Alex Padilla and Cory Booker have introduced this bill called the Visible Act. And here we have Rep. Don Goldman talking about this. And we can kind of see the escalation and the exaggeration and the hypersensitive language that he's using here. But I want you guys to hear it.
Over the last month, Donald Trump has militarized civil immigration enforcement to create fear and intimidation among so many different communities, to evade accountability for officers, and to just jack up deportation numbers with nonviolent, non-criminal immigrants going through the process the right way. This is authoritarian, militarized secret police.
See, this is the language they have to use. They have to inflame, they have to exaggerate, they have to sensationalize. But when we look for the tit for tat, you know, we never saw this when it came to Joe Biden, right? Joe Biden was trying to elevate his numbers when it came to the vaccine and even threatened people or mentioned that if you didn't get the vaccine, if you work for the federal government or in the military, you could lose your job or you could face punishments and fines and these sorts of things. And this is all to help it trickle down into the private sector. Now, when it comes to these police officers, it's a different story. And it's important to point out here. And I asked a little bit of help here from ChatGPT so you guys could see this in a organized fashion, because that's what we do here on the BuzWeaver channel. We take the difficult, we take the complicated, we take the tumult, we take the confusion, and we break it down as simply as we can. So I asked ChatGPT, what other law enforcement agencies participate with ICE? U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement often works in collaboration with a variety of federal, state, and local enforcement agencies. So it isn't just ICE. You know, you've got FBI, you've got DIA, you've got U.S. Marshals, you got the ATF, you got the Customs and Border Patrol, you got the Department of Homeland Security, you got TSA, you got FEMA, you got USCIS. You've got all these different agencies that work with ICE. And these individuals, in many cases, aren't going to be, have levels of protection for themselves, because they work in a lot of these, like, for example, the FBI, for example, and the DEA and the ATF work undercover in many cases. And so their identity being exposed and them being discovered is going to create an issue with their operations. And so we go back to the situation that happened in Minnesota. The former appointee of Tim Walz that went out and harmed 2 senators in Minnesota, obviously. And he posed as a police officer. And here's another tit-for-tat thing to keep in mind. When the police were looking for this guy, the police specifically said, do not answer your door if only one officer is there. Because typically, these officers, as you saw even in this video a second ago that I was showing you here, almost every one of the officers, there were more than one officer. There were several officers or many officers. So it is less likely that groups, so for example, if someone is going to commit crimes or pose to police officers, they typically do this by themselves, right? It's a loner individual. It's usually not a combination of individual people. That's not to suggest that it couldn't happen. It's just one more element to it that helps you eliminate the possibility of there being someone imitating law enforcement, is if there's more than one individual there. So when I've seen ICE operate, they have done this with many different agencies as well as with many different officers. Just like we saw yesterday in the park when they were showing the park there in California. California's, the Border Patrol as well as ICE and maybe other additional agents. Now, how far this bill is going to go, it's very difficult to say whether it will pass or whether it will do anything. But to me, this is just another maneuver by Democrats to just simply appear as though they're trying to do something, right? Because their constituents are constantly yelling and screaming at them to do something. And when they say do something, what they mean is stop Donald Trump. Because that's what Democrats have been doing by obstructing and everything that we're seeing with SCOTUS. As a matter of fact, as of this very day, as of today, I just saw my notification. Supreme Court lets Trump resume plans for mass federal layoffs. So it's a constant battle against Trump to simply just to be a nuisance to him, just to make things as difficult for him as possible because the Democrats aren't in control. And so this legislation, absolutely, if they want to try to pass it, they can try. But you see here, ICE agents have seen a 500% increase in violent threats and assaults and a doxing efforts by leftists, because that's what leftists do. Why do you think they're recording these officers? Well, for their own platforms that they have, as well as to embarrass and humiliate and to demean and to undermine. Why do you think we heard the whole defund police and all of these other things that started way back during the Obama administration? There's a clear directive here. So for every point that the left can make about why they need this, the right or others or common sense thinking people can think of many other reasons why it should not. And one of those reasons I say also, as I want to point out, is, you can be, if you're concerned, you can always call the police, right? You can always call the police, because the police may not say specifically that they know an operation is going on or what activity is going on in the area, but they will know. They may not be able to explain it to you or outline it to you, but they're going to know whether it's a viable threat or not, most likely. So if you want to contact the police because you see a situation that seems unusual or suspicious, by all means, contact the police. Let them know, because they're going to have at least some sort of an idea if there is an operation in that area. So I just want to let you know that. Now, they may not be able to explain it to you, but they can at least do that. So we'll see if these senators and reps will be able to pass this bill. But as Tom Homan said, it's going to continue. But this is what happens when you allow individuals to get comfortable in a particular situation, and now you want to take action against it. It's just a situation that's very typical of human nature, right? Once you get away with something and you can continue to get away with it, and suddenly that changes, then of course everyone's going to get upset, right? Because you get into a pattern, you get into a routine, you get comfortable, You get familiar with what's going on, and then all of a sudden, this happens. Law enforcement comes in and says, we're taking care of this issue. It's a big problem, as many of us know. And, of course, it is. They are still targeting and or supposed to be targeting genuine criminals that have criminal records and so forth. So, yeah, unfortunately, there might be some other individuals that get caught up in this from time to time. But nonetheless, this idea of passing this bill to unmask them, because even if they're ICE agents, like I said, as we saw here with ChatGPT, there are so many other agencies that work with them that will need to have their identities protected because they do undercover work. And so I would assume that maybe ICE also does something very similar to it. For example, when they were in California, they started all the riots. They were there for fraud. They weren't there to look for a particular person. They were looking there for fraud and money laundering. So it wasn't even about trying to find a particular individual, but an organization that was going on there with the cartel. So ladies and gentlemen, it's a tit for tat, back and forth over this, that, or the other. But again, when it comes down to it, if people are suspicious, call the police. And typically, officers are going to work together as a unit or as a team. So it's not going to be like one individual posing as this. Because I saw like the video before this one over here. I'm sorry I keep going to stupid TikTok. Let me go ahead and explain why I pull up the TikTok. Because I did do a TikTok on officers' faces there in California, because it was... they wanted to change the policies there in California, right? Mayor Bass wanted to introduce a bill that would require that they wear masks. But, we go back to what we asked with ChatGPT and other agencies. But nonetheless, guys, thank you so very much for your continued support across New Tech. That's BitChute, Rumble, and Odyssey. Below this video, you can find the various particulars, and you guys will know how to sort all that out. But I do appreciate your support. Your support of the channel can be as simple as the likes, the shares, and the comments. But, of course, the additional links down below, of course, help out as well. But thank you so very much for all of you here on YouTube as well for your guys' continued support here in 2025. Appearing there on the screen, that'd be the channel icon. You guys can click on that to subscribe, as well as to select notifications. That way you know when there's content here on the channel. And I'll see all you guys in the next video.